Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Watson Michael from Ceylon Institute of English and Leadership. And today we have a very special guest with us. His name is Mr. Rory Moore, all the way from the UK. So he was in Forbes Under 30 for 2022. Also described by the former UK Prime Minister as an inspiration and testament to the power of youth. He received the Point of Light of Honor from the UK Prime Minister for creating the world's largest COVID-19 volunteering organization. The Prime Minister asked him to advise the UK government on volunteering strategy and received Martin Luther King Award in recognition of his status as one of the most successful campaigners on youth issues in the United Kingdom. Also, he was appointed as a global shaper for the World Economic Forum and a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. So Rory, welcome, and how are you doing?
Thank you, Watson. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you today. I'm doing very well, so looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. So yes, so Rory, based on your experience, what are the tips and advice you would give to people who want to make an impact in their community?
So I think it's a really good question, and I think obviously lots of people want to make an impact in their community and they want to do something that makes a positive difference, but sometimes it's hard to understand how they can do that because there are lots of challenges you face and lots of obstacles to overcome. So I think the first thing to say is that people should always choose something they're passionate about. That might sound strange because of course you're going to do something you're passionate about, but lots of people feel they should do something for their community and they choose a cause or an issue that they don't really care that much about. And so if you're doing something that you're not really passionate about, you're unlikely to be able to succeed, because when you're starting an initiative in your community, of course, there's going to be lots of obstacles. There's going to be lots of times when it's very difficult and you feel like giving up. So unless you choose something you're passionate about, it's going to be hard to find the motivation to keep working. So, for example, everyone has different things they're interested in or that they feel really strongly about. So whether you want to do something relating to climate change or educational equality or sort of socio-economic justice, there's all sorts of different things. And my number one advice would be to people to explore different things and find what's they're passionate about, because that's crucial. But also, I think it's important that people start something local before scaling it more broadly. So, for example, I started an organization during the pandemic to connect volunteers with people who needed help. And although it ended up becoming a global organization in 40 countries across 6 continents, I never intended to create that. I just started it in the village where I was living. And once it worked in my village, then we expanded it to some more villages around, and then eventually to other parts of the UK, then to Europe and to the world. So if on the first day I'd said, I want to create this organization all across the world, it probably wouldn't have worked. So my advice to people is start something locally, because then you can see if it works, and then when the model works, you can expand it slowly, rather than thinking about the end goal and being motivated by getting the recognition or the awards. You should be motivated by the impact and starting at a local level. So I think, it's important to be passionate. It's important to start something locally, but most importantly of all, be prepared to encounter failure, because the truth is that no journey from starting an organization through to it being successful, that no journey is completely linear. You're always going to face a lot of challenges and obstacles. People will tell you that it's impossible, or you'll face when you feel like giving up. So I think it's crucial that you're resilient, that you persevere. And if you have that mindset that failure is not a bad thing, and that actually you want to learn from failure to make yourself better and to make your organization better, then I think that's a crucial attitude to have. So those are a few sort of actionable pieces of advice that I'd give to people who want to start something in their community.
100% right. This will help a lot of people, what you just mentioned. So how can strategic partnerships be used to create a global impact?
So actually, I used strategic partnerships a lot when I was doing my COVID-19 organization, because I started it when I was, I think, 18 years old. And I didn't have much of a network. So I was just in my village at the start of the pandemic. And obviously, I wanted to get the word out there and encourage other young people to volunteer and be a part of it. But just me as an 18-year-old sitting in my bedroom of my parents' house, it was difficult for me to get the word out there and for people to hear about it. So I actually made a number of different partnerships with organizations that already had a reputation. So, you know, we started with small organizations, with charities and NGOs, and we ended up partnering with organizations like the United Nations who promoted our work. So I found that having these strategic partnerships really helped us to a couple of things. Firstly, for people to trust what we were doing, because of course we were asking people to volunteer and go to people and support them. Of course, you know, people who are receiving help want to know that it's not just some you know, strange organization they've never heard of, but if it's endorsed by these leading institutions, then they can trust it more. So it helps us build a reputation. But also strategic partnerships helped me just reach more people because, for example, the United Nations, they shared about our work on their Twitter account, so millions of people could see it. And me, as an 18-year-old at the time in my bedroom in the UK, I didn't have the ability to reach millions of people. So this helped us really expand our work. And finally, I also worked with lots of other charities and NGOs because for us, it was really important to help them because we basically designed an app where people could log on and use geolocation to find someone in their area who needed help, or if they needed help, they could find a volunteer in their area. So it was quite a disruptive model. And charities at first were skeptical because we were essentially removing their role as middleman because people could essentially find and volunteer without a charity. So we faced a lot of pushback, but actually we ended up partnering with a lot of charities because they realized that they could help more people through using our app. Because if, for example, there's a charity in one village and there's a village 5 minutes down the road, but that charity doesn't know needs help there, they could use that app to help more people. And of course, that's what charities want to do. So yeah, I think all these partnerships really helped us to, you know, increase people's awareness of us, improve our reputation, but also just help more people, which is, of course, the most important thing during the pandemic, which was a challenging time for all of us.
Absolutely. It's been challenging for many of us. And when you said you started at 18, it reminds me because I started my corporate career when I was 18 years, right? So I went through a lot, but eventually here I am. Yes. So like, based on what you say, like, why should businesses engage in a CSR, also known as corporate social responsibility, and why is it important?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic actually, because corporate social responsibility is becoming something that more executives and more companies are aware of. Partly it's driven by the fact that consumers now are a lot more interested in what companies' values are and what the impact on society is. And I actually do a lot of advisory work with corporate companies, helping them understand why CSR matters and how to do it. I think one of the key takeaways is that it's becoming almost imperative that companies have a CSR strategy. As I mentioned, consumers nowadays are, especially younger consumers like Generation Z, like people my age, they're now really scrutinizing, for example, if they're buying, let's say, some clothes, they'll want to understand, like, what's the supply chain? Is it ethical? What's its impact? Is it using human slavery? Is it, for example, having a negative impact on the climate? So young consumers are now, you know, really scrutinizing when making purchases. So if companies aren't thinking about their corporate social responsibility, then they're missing out potentially on a large market, because Gen Z is one of those largest markets. So I think that's one of the things I would say. But also more broadly, CSR, and this is what I tell executives, it can actually have a positive impact for the company. Traditionally, in the last few years, companies think CSR is something they can do to improve their brand reputation. It helps their marketing. But actually, CSR has been found in many cases to have a positive impact on the financials of companies, because you know, whether it's, for example, you know, making cost savings, if a company evaluates its energy efficiency, it can actually save money because energy is expensive nowadays. So that's one thing. But also, if you can attract more customers because you have a good brand, and people will also stay loyal to you because they see you care about the world and the planet, that's positive. Finally, especially young people, when it comes to employment, you know, the young people now, around 75% of them will only work for a company if they feel that its values resonate with the company. So if a company doesn't do something for the social, you know, for society and through its CSR, then it might actually struggle to attract and retain young talent. So there's all sorts of reasons why CSR matters for companies, why they should think about it. But most importantly, we should remember that CSR is about actually making a positive impact, right? The world is in a challenging place, whether that's with the climate, whether that's with social, you know, injustice. And so CSR ultimately should be about making the world a better place. So I think it's important because companies are the key actors along with government in changing societies. So it's important that are aware of the challenges we face, and do something to help that. But also they should remember that it has benefits for them too.
Absolutely. So when you say like that, yeah, I remember, yeah, it was today, this morning, I was reading an article. All of a sudden it popped up on my phone, and it was about the Gen Z, and it was a NORAM article. It was mentioned that most of the Gen Z people, they want to see the pay before they take the job. So some of them had asked for the pay to be there on job advertisements, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it is. So, how can we based on this, how can we engage the younger people to create a better policy?
I think I've done a lot of work in advocacy. You know, my whole sort of journey in the social impact space started in advocacy. So I was elected to the UK Youth Parliament. So I was representing a 250,000 people from my area in Surrey, where I'm from, on a national level. So I regularly met with members of the government and cabinet ministers to talk about issues that matter to young people, because quite often policy was being created. And of course, people under the age of 18 in the UK, they don't get a vote in elections. But of course, the policy that's being made still impacts the lives of young people, right? So my mission and my role was to make sure that the government was listening to what young people said and what they cared about, so that could be reflected in policy. So I think always difficult to engage young people. Of course, my mission was to make young people's voices heard. But another challenge I faced was actually making young people want to be heard, because in many cases they weren't particularly interested in politics. They thought it wasn't, something for them. So I kind of faced two challenges. I think for convincing young people they should be interested in politics, I just wanted to show them that legislation and decisions that are made on a daily basis by the government or by parliament does have an impact. You might not think about it, or you might not realize how, but all of the society around us is shaped by the legislation and by the government. And so it's crucial that people understand that they can actually make a change. They don't just have to accept things as it is. There are ways and mechanisms to have an input on the way that the way that your country or the region more broadly looks. So that's one thing. But in terms of how we actually engage young people practically, I think it's really crucial that governments, not just governments, but also the private sector, companies, engage young people, because the more you listen to young people, the better you can actually get outcomes, because young people are the future, right? Because tomorrow, from 10, 15 years from now, the people who are young today are going to be the ones in positions of power. And the decisions that are being made today will reflect that world that we live in tomorrow. So I think it's crucial to engage young people. And I mentioned that government has a key role to play in that, but also companies, because as I mentioned earlier, companies are a key stakeholder and have a lot of influence on the way the world works. And we are now starting to see more companies having youth boards. So of course they have their normal board of their usual board, and then now some companies are having youth boards where they engage young people and get a perspective from young people on what the company is doing, how to improve, how to be more youth centric. So there's a lot of different ways and mechanisms that companies or governments can use to listen to young people. But I think it's really crucial, and I want to use this platform to highlight the fact that whether it's a politician or whether it's a business person, they should definitely be listening to what young people have to say, because we are the future, and we do really care about what the world is going to be like in 15 or 20 years from now.
Yeah, very true. Very true. So a bit of an interesting thing. So how do you see the future of education, and do you think technology will play a role?
Yeah, so it's a very sort of a big question, the future of education. I could speak for hours. I'll keep it short. But I think there's a number of different trends that we're seeing. I think one of the first things to mention is that we're moving towards a more of a skills-based education system, partly because of the world is changing so rapidly. We're going through the fourth industrial revolution. Lots of automation is changing the way that jobs work and changing what the future looks like. I think one of the most incredible stats that I came across was that 65% of young people who are in school today will be doing jobs we don't know exist now. So that's about 2/3 of young people will be doing jobs in the future that right now we don't even know exist. So that underlines the fact that the job market and the world more broadly is changing rapidly, and the current education system is not really set up to teach people to be adaptable and to learn skills that will have to be learned in the future. Right now, it's quite traditional. The education system hasn't changed too much, so I think that's one thing. The fact that education will have to change to focus on skills and making people adaptable, because otherwise if people can't reskill and learn more from new things, then they'll be struggling to get jobs in the 21st century job market. So that's one thing. I think the other key trend that I'm seeing is the role of technology is becoming increasingly important. If you look at education as a sector, it hasn't embraced technology as much as other sectors. I mean, we've seen how technology has transformed a lot of industries, and even now it's to transform all sorts of other sectors as well. But education is quite traditional because the model of education has been around for thousands of years, right? Where someone stands up and who's experienced and delivers knowledge to people who are inexperienced, and that model has been around arguably for thousands of years. But we haven't seen too much innovation in light of technology. What has changed, though, is especially as a result of the pandemic, where people couldn't go to a classroom, they were forced to learn remotely. That's accelerated the adoption of technology. So, people are now used to or more accustomed to learning online, for example, on a smartphone or a tablet. This is something that's becoming increasingly prominent. So that's one big change. But also more broadly, I personally work in looking at the higher education space, so sort of university level. And again, what we're seeing is that there's people are now less wanting to study a degree and more wanting to study a different form of education, because the truth is that people are spending thousands and thousands of dollars and multiple years studying a course or a degree that doesn't make them more employable. So people are realizing actually the university system, which has not really changed in the last 50 years, is now not really for purpose and not providing them with the skills. But also more people are to university, and this means that more people have a degree, and so it's actually in many cases a degree isn't what it used to make you more employable because it made you stand out, but now lots of people have degrees and they have to find another way to make themselves more employable. So there's all sorts of interesting trends happening in education. As I say, I could talk about it for a long time, but I think these are some of the key things I would highlight: the role of technology, also the changing landscape in the light of new skills, but also the fact that the pandemic has accelerated the adoption of digital technology for learning, which I think is really exciting.
Absolutely. So I started Seoul in 2021. So actually I wanted to have it offline and I wanted to get the students in the old-fashioned way. But a friend of mine said, no, you're not going to get business. Why don't you start online? That's what some people are doing. So I thought, all right, let's give it a shot. And here I am, right? So our training program is 100% online. So that's how we do. So, I mean, post-COVID, multiple changes have happened and it's happening like that. So, Rory, so do you have any final message which you want to give for people of all ages? I mean, young or old, who really want to change their dreams and who want to go after it? Because I was reading a book a couple of weeks back. It was Grinding It Out by Ray Kroc, the McDonald's, the man who bought from the Donald brothers. So he started actually at 52, while most people consider retiring, right?
Yeah.
So do you have any final message which will give you and the young and the old people?
Yeah, definitely. I think certainly from my experience, what I've seen is that really you can make your own luck, which might sound a bit strange, but you actually make your own luck and make your own opportunities. I think there's a lot of people who really, want to do something, and in many cases they feel that something will come to them, or if they just kind of wait, then they'll find the right opportunity. And what I've seen is that if I were to sit around and kind of wait for stuff to come to me, quite often situation doesn't change. And so the key takeaway from that is I've just always tried to go out there, meet as many people as possible, build my network and see what happens, go to events and put myself outside of my comfort zone, because there's lots of things that I did as a young person where I was interacting with people who are a lot older than me, and I could have felt uncomfortable, I could have felt nervous and out of place. But I think just by putting myself out there and taking as many opportunities as possible, meeting people, making my own luck, and then one opportunity really leads to another. So I think if you want something really bad, you should have to just put yourself out there and go out of your way to try and make it happen, because if you just wait, it might not come to you. So I think that's the key piece of advice to people of any age. Just try and make your own luck and just try and meet as many people as possible. It's easy nowadays. People are used to meeting on Zoom, so yeah, build your network and just try and make your own luck. And I think then anything is possible.
Absolutely. So wise words we heard just now from Rory, right? So he performs well under adversity, and he started his COVID volunteering program in a very small way in Surrey, and today it's in over 40 countries. So he's a true inspiration. So for everyone who is grumbling and complaining, please learn from him. So Rory, thank you very much for taking time and doing this podcast with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.